Yeah, let's go ahead and get it started. I think we have a pretty good group here, and the beginning, will be just a bit of a ramble, and then the intent is to kind of open this up for people's ideas to kind of get as many people's ideas as we can. So, well, maybe we'll have a structure of, I'm going to say a few things. We also have kind of a guest we'd like to bring on, who was instrumental in the development of both OHM and Klima's DAO, and so we're pretty excited to bring on Hugh, who can give us a little bit of advice, a little bit of DAO advice, and then after that we can kind of open up the floor a little bit. So, Hugh, I see you there. So yeah, as far as I wanted to chat a little bit about what we have, set up so far, who we have, and then just well, I was going to read some notes from a conversation that we had with Hugh, but since he's here, it might be better to just to bring him up so he can chat a little bit about kind of high level structure, what works and what doesn't work. It's very important to start out with the idea of what does success look like, and what would it look like if we were super successful, like beyond our wildest dreams, we were just bringing people in like crazy. How do we get everyone into Beanstalk? How do we get everyone's individual contributions? We want to get the best out of people, and we want to make it a really open experience to be involved in Beanstalk. We also need to be able to handle that. And we don't want to have pearls cast before swine, we don't want to have wasted energy, wasted effort. So when someone comes to us and says that they want to work for the DAO, we need to be organized and we need to be ready for their contribution. So I think that's sort of a fundamental idea that I have, and I think that most of us have. But going from there in an organized way, is the goal. So this chat is part of that. So Hugh, I'm going to bring you up on stage. You can chat for a little bit, and then I think we'd like to keep this conversation, around an hour. I think if we end up going for an hour and 15 or even an hour 30, that would be okay. But let's try to, when you have something to say, come up on the stage, and then we'll kind of take people up in order. But first, we're going to bring up Hugh. Just invited you up.
Oh. Hey, everybody, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you pretty well.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you. It's an actual privilege and an honor to be here. I was on a call with the guys here a couple of hours ago, and I mentioned that like a longtime Bean fan, essentially. Got my NFT Bean or BNFT, and yeah, I'm stoked to have this alignment between my experience and background and the needs of the DAO. It feels like there is an opportunity to contribute in a meaningful way. Maybe the way I'll structure this part of the conversation would just be, like, first of all, just share a bit about myself and my background, how I came to do what I'm doing right now, and then like potentially just put together some thoughts on or some initial thoughts on what I think good looks like for this next phase of the DAO. So a bit about myself. I recently left my full-time job. Actually, my last day was on Friday. And the role that I left was a job in which I would go to companies, and this is with a bigger organization, but we would go to companies and say to them, hey, here are all these different startups that you could be building. And they would recruit us to basically come up with a whole range of different startup ideas. And then if they liked them, they would go and they would ask us to go build them. And so like a lot of 0 to 1 experience in terms of startups. And my role there was like a product management role. I got into crypto through this company actually. Like we tried to build we looked at building something using like Terraform Labs, actually like a payments app, and that got me down the rabbit hole. But yeah, I think in earnest started contributing into the DAO world around July of this year. So I mean, in the grand scheme of things, pretty short, a pretty short time frame. But in DeFi, that seems like a long time. And yeah, just jumped into the Olympus server, started helping out there, and then realized that that DAO needed support on setting up these like projects where they had people from different skill sets coming in and contributing and working on the same things. So that was my experience at the beginning, setting up kind of like their Notion. And then when one of the forks that came out of Olympus was called Klima DAO, and I managed to find my way there, and now I'm running operations over there. And so we've recently just set up like a full kind of Discord and Notion instance for them, which is really exciting because they're starting to get a lot of traction, a lot of contributors wanting to join, and it's a very vibrant culture and a very vibrant community. But yeah, like along the way, there are a lot of learnings. A couple of them that I think may have already been top of mind for a lot of people on the call. There's going to be, that whole point around we should look at what it would look like to be really successful, as opposed to, looking at where we are today with respect to where we might want to be. It's almost like you don't think of the ways that it could go wrong and try to solve for those. Think of like the problem will arise when we're really successful, when we have hundreds of people wanting to join the DAO eventually. Like, how do we scale up that the processes surrounding the DAO, from everything from onboarding, like recruitment and onboarding, through to granting permissions and getting people aligned on what is valuable in the DAO. Like, do we want people to be working on X, Y, and Z, or do we want people aligned to the sort of overall objectives? And how to do that in a scalable and decentralized way that's fit within a mostly flat hierarchy, I think is a really important goal. But along the way, there is a lot of pitfalls that I've seen in terms of how these DAOs structure themselves, how to make the best use of the contributors that we have, and there's a whole load of other things there too. But I mean, maybe I'll just pause there. I'm not sure if you can hear my microwaves going off in the background, but maybe I'll just pause there and see before going into any of the details. Like, are there any thoughts or questions, or any way you want me to talk to going from here?
Yeah, that's great. The microwave is not a problem. We can hear it a little bit, but it's fine. But if you could, I guess maybe just give us a couple of those pitfalls, a couple of the things that, one thing that's really great is we have the time now, or hopefully we have the time before things really, really blow up, as far as beans getting more and more popular and used, to take this time to structure ourselves. So what advice do you have for us? What pitfalls did you see at OHM and Klima? And can you just give us a little bit of a high level on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So around the time that I joined Olympus was when they were starting to ramp up their like onboarding of contributors, and it worked pretty well to begin with. But one of the main things that really broke down was the use of the tools that people were coordinating work and communicating with each other. There wasn't any consistency around that, and it led to all these issues around, like projects were hard to manage, like people were misaligned and a whole bunch of other things. I think that, one of the big learnings for us was, it's really important to have, and this is going to sound super obvious when I say it, but like it's really important to have, people who are coming into this DAO will come in with an alignment to a function, whether it's engineering, graphic design, business, sales, etc., marketing. But when they come into this world, you're working on projects most of the time. There's definitely BAU work that's siloed, but there's this big challenge of like, how do you bring in somebody who's not a full-time employee into an environment where they need to work across different departments, they need to have context, and they need to have fluid, transparent communications. And that is a really big problem that's hard to solve. It requires a lot of training in terms of how to use a specific tool. I know that like engineers would be most familiar with like Jira, but there's a benefit in working completely on Notion, or at least like working on one tool specifically. That's something that's a really big thing, where you can find this tool which it works just as well for somebody who's a designer as it does for a person who wants to strike up a partnership. That's really good, because what it means is like all the information now is captured and stored in this one location. And historically what happens is people manage projects on Discord, and decisions get made on Discord, and they're not documented anywhere except for these like long threads of communication. And that just like breaks down transparency, because people who work in different time zones wake up with hundreds of missed messages, and they don't really understand what the latest and greatest is. So the big challenge of like project-based work, and how do you create transparency of communications for people that are coming in and out? That's like a really big one. Probably the second big one is the kinds of contributors that you want to bring in. Continuity is incredibly important here. I was thinking like having somebody who can contribute 10 hours per week is better than somebody who can contribute 40 hours per week, provided that the person who contributes 10 can do so over a longer period of time. If the 40-hour per week person is churning after 2 weeks, that doesn't really help us. There's an enormous amount of overhead that comes in with training and onboarding, that you don't want to do that activity very often. You want to err on the side of quality and consistency over mercenaries. It's almost analogous to yield farming, where you get mercenary DAO contributors coming in, and they just like jump on the Discord, they talk in a whole bunch of channels, and they don't actually do that much. There's this report that I'll share for everyone who's interested, where they look at like the average number of DAOs that people contribute to, and it's about 3. But that number goes up to 8, and I'm sure many of you know. I think it's like Cooper Trooper. He's in like 100 Discords, I'm sure. So does that lead to impact? Is a question. I think focus is a really valuable thing that is like highly underrated. So focus and continuity. That's number 2. And thirdly, I'd say that kind of more specifically on Notion and Discord is just like having clarity of what the purpose of these tools are for. Like, as I said, I think I mentioned this as well, but like, Discord is for communicating, for organizing, for asking questions and stuff. But frankly, we're at a point in Klima DAO where if it's not written in a project spec or in a requirements doc, it's just not going to happen. And so our conversations become much less about explaining things for every single person who happens to not have context, to pointing people to a file or a location on Notion so that they can get up to speed. The fact that like Notion is the single source of truth is like a huge game changer when it comes to giving context. So yeah, that's the clarity. And then I think that the final one is just around the structure of Notion itself needs to be conducive to scale. Yeah, like this is a multifaceted problem, but you can imagine any structure would work fine provided people know how to use it. But some structures work better than others because of their simplicity and the ease at which you can communicate the purpose of them. So I think there's a bit of work around, like what is the optimal, what is the optimal framework that we want to run with, and there's definitely optionality there. And I know that like I've just been given access to Beans Notion, and it looks like some of the foundational bits are in place, but then what would be important or more important is like how does this work when you have 50 contributors, and how does this work when you have like 500 contributors down the line? And the jury's definitely still out on whether DAOs can scale that much. But yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment to have, and you want to be set up correctly from day one so that you don't need to think about this. It's just like evolutions. Because yeah, with Olympus DAO, it ended up being, let's just throw together something and it will be fine. To 4 months down the track, oh, this doesn't work. We need to completely change everything, and it's going to be a huge exercise of like change management to get that to be implemented. So that was a lot of rambling. I apologize for everyone on the call. Maybe does that answer your question?
It does. I think that was very helpful. And as far as to just get us kicked off, can you give us an idea, because we're also talking about structure as far as how we should organize or self-organize among departments. Do you have an idea of, would you be willing to share with us OHM and Klima's kind of department structure as kind of a jumping off point, so that then maybe we could chat amongst the DAO if that would make sense for Beanstalk? And that's kind of where I'd like to open the conversation up and let everyone in to to see what their ideas are.
Yeah, and for context on this, Klima, very new. It launched in, I think, September or October, but this is reflective of a fairly young DAO, which has room to change. So the way that they are currently structured is that there are 6 departments. There's engineering, partnerships, creative marketing, community, and operations. Within and so some of these are some of these are divided into sub departments. For instance, with engineering, we have front end, back end, and data and analytics. Within creative, we have graphic, video design, and we also have UX and UI design, which I know sits more in the sort of product world, maybe more aligned to engineering, but that in the future will be split off in anticipation of being more kind of like a product-led organization. Marketing is its own beast. That's a big team in terms of the number of people. Community is also fairly large. And operations is, the way that we've conceptualized it is, it's 3 types of activities. It's one, project where you're setting up a process from 0 to 1. So think like, setting up our Notion, or like setting up how we do contributor payouts, etc. To kind of the BAU, like let's just run this process. You're the point of call for any requests on Discord, permission changes, blah, blah, blah. And then where this role potentially evolves is playing this role of like a project owner or project manager, I suppose, where there's, let's just say there's a project that requires marketing, community, creative, and partnerships. I see there's an opportunity for a person to play kind of like a coordinator role across that. And that could come from anywhere. But yeah, at this stage, that's where Klima DAO's thinking of moving operations toward is that coordinator kind of or facilitator role for a project. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I think that's great.
Could I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
How big is Klima DAO, and what did it the growth from September to now?
In terms of the DAO itself, they currently have between 50 and 60 contributors. But I would say in terms of full time, you would be looking at 8 core that have been building the product from scratch, and probably I'd say 15 to 20 full-time contributors, with the remaining being people who contribute between 5 and 20 hours per week.
That's a good piece of context. Thanks for asking that, Evan. Okay, well, I think now I think it's time to kind of open up the stage and see what people's overall thoughts are. And yeah, floodgates are open. Raise your hands.
I guess I have another question, and I'm up here. Don't need to raise my hand. So I was wondering how do you kind of balance the level of autonomy with how does the practice of balancing the autonomy with kind of like centralization, asking for how do you define like what people can do and what they need to talk to other people about or get approval for, or draw that line, and how does that work in practice too?
Did you have an example in mind of like a situation?
I guess I don't have a specific situation in mind. More so, we're trying to be as autonomous and decentralized as possible, and recognize that we do need centralized areas that will, greatly benefit the growth and structure of the DAO. And within those structures, how do people kind of I understand you start kind of self-volunteering at a DAO, you have your specific skill set, and you try to find where you fit in and you're able to contribute and everything. But if there's, I guess, once you're done, I guess there has to be some sort of, coordination where you report or who validates your work, and how does performance judge, what's the word I'm looking for, performance reviews, I guess, work month to month, who is kind of keeping an eye on other people and making sure that things are getting done?
Yeah, man, great question. I think this has it depends on what stage of maturity the DAO is. There's a utopian view of DAOs, which is that people can self-coordinate and work towards a common goal really effectively. And then there's the lived experience of being in many DAOs like that and seeing how without proper structure and without proper leadership, that can fall apart really quickly. I think in an early a low maturity DAO, what I've seen work in the past, and it's definitely not the only answer, is you have people who are almost tasked with leading or at least coordinating the departments that they're representing, and fielding and getting alignment with the core team. So in practice, that would be, you would have somebody who leads the marketing function, and their role is to ensure that the priorities of the marketing team are well aligned with with those set up at the core by the core team. And then, are they being executed according to those priorities? The work, is it being executed? Would be that person working with the contributors in that department. So there's like, that is a very it's a bit of a reality of like an early stage. You need a little bit more centralization, but the process in which you would become a department lead would be something that you would make incredibly transparent, and it's not like a king kind of role. Where that like becomes more autonomous and self-organizing is where you get agreement at the DAO level on what are the kind of overarching objectives that you're all shooting towards. So in other organizations, they would call these OKRs, but call them whatever you want, provided that the projects and the work and the tasks that are being worked on are aligned to these like overarching objectives. You should feel comfortable compensating for that. And as a contributor, the expectation should be like really, really clear. Like what do you reward and what don't you reward? So, for instance, like you reward impact, you reward like delivering a project against one of the overall objectives of the DAO. What you don't reward is jumping into these discords and being a mercenary contributor and chatting a whole bunch but not actually doing anything. So setting up these objectives and then tying the contributor allocations to those objectives in a meaningful way is one kind of like important step on becoming more self-organized. And I think like as the DAO gets bigger and bigger, then then you can start thinking about okay, how can we build more autonomy with these teams to reward contributors, but make it in like a more kind of not codified way, but somehow more like clearly defined. And I think that's just a factor of maturity.
That's really interesting. Thanks.
No worries.
Okay, we brought a few more people up. Let's see. I think Simotes, God of Beans. I'll let you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, Hugh, sorry, it was just really quick. Can you state again, like the size of the DAO? I think that cut out. Just the size of the DAO and then the core structure team that you have again.
Absolutely, yeah. So the core team, the developers that built the protocol, I think there are 7 or 8, and I think one of them is a lawyer and one of them is a business person. In terms of the contributors, there are between 50 and 60. Of those, I would argue 10 to 15 of them are full-time, and the remaining folks are people that contribute between 10 and 15 hours per week.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, A1, sir.
Hi, Hugh. Thank you for providing your insight. Just a couple questions for you. In your experience, where do you see the most efficiency, or if you were going to, let's just say, have a community that had low maturity, what sector would you put the most emphasis on?
Like in which sense are you talking about?
Sure. So like, for example, is it, marketing, or, where do you see that there is, like, it sounds like you've been in a couple communities, but where initially do you see that there's a disparity and something that needs high emphasis for a newer community?
Yeah. Well, this is like very much dependent on every DAO. Like every DAO will have areas where they need to overinvest, and there might be strategic reasons for like whether you would overinvest in a capability or a team. For being, I wouldn't be able to say for sure, but what I can generalize and say tends to happen is you tend to have a tighter engineering team, which means like fewer but high quality full-time engineers. But then in terms of the business functions of community marketing partnerships, Klima is not a great example, because with Klima it's heavily reliant on partnerships, so partnerships is fairly big. Marketing is also really large, and there's a strategic reason for that, and there's a reality of that, which is many people can make a website on Squarespace or whatever, and so marketing is just it's something that many people put their hands in the ring for. But I would argue like where a big emphasis should be played is on the community side, and depending on where you put this, like this would be it would include communicating how in Klima's case it's like price discussion is not important because it's a rebasing token, like communicating the fundamentals of market value. How do you manage public relations if something a report comes out that is unfavorable? How do you get on the front foot of that? How do you create these really engaging experiences like that mobilize the community? And this is one of the things that Bean's doing incredibly well at. So I think to answer that question in the context of Bean would definitely need more kind of like discovery. But maybe just to throw that question back to you is like, what do you think is where do you think is the gap, and like what would you kind of see as the need to invest more in as the DAO grows?
Good question. I mean, I'm still new in the community, but I think engagement is probably one of the primary things to keep the community growing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I just got to get the door. Just 1 second. I'll be right back.
We'll let Hugh get the door, and then following A1 Sir's question, we'll go to eWheel, and then Beanology.
All right, back.
So just finishing up on what A1 Sir said, he was saying that engagement, community engagement, I think, is probably the thing that he sees would be the most missing. Is that right, A1 Sir?
That's correct, or something that I feel is essential to community growth and keeping the protocol going.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, the vectors of competition are very different in Web3. It's like community, and given the fact that your code base can be forked like so easily, you're much more reliant on having a strong community that can carry that community forward, or carry that DAO forward.
Okay, Uriel?
Hey, Hugh. Good to meet, and thanks for doing this. Super appreciative. I was hoping you might be able to spend a couple minutes talking about setting long-term goals as a DAO. I think the bit that you touched on a few minutes ago about OKRs and sort of department level project goals was super helpful. But how do you think about coordinating long-term goals, whether it's from the core team's perspective? What are the best mechanisms to set those goals, and then also hold departments and the organization as a whole accountable towards those goals?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The way I think about this is that it's a hierarchy. At the top, you've got your overall mission and objective. That's almost like your vision as a, maybe it's like a 5-year long-term vision. But then, underneath that, you would have these goals that are set at the DAO level. So, and the way that, the time frame that you would look at would be more the 1 year time frame, or in crypto it might be more like 6 months. And then beneath that, these like DAO goals are the ones that are going to inform how you develop at the department level. So beneath that, you would then be setting up quarterly, or any earlier, any less than quarterly, it's probably more effort than it's worth. But yeah, you would set more frequent goals that ladder up to those DAO-wide goals. So yeah, with your OKRs, you would have qualitative statements that are descriptive of what the objective is, and then beneath that, you would want to substantiate that with quantitative targets that say, okay, we want to be the best DAO there is in DeFi, but like, what does that actually mean? It's like it can be quantified as, we have a retention rate of X. We have a contributor engagement score of 90% or something like that. That quantification puts everyone who's signed up to that OKR on the line to achieve that. And it also informs how you would review and understand success. And then the process would be that you set up these times periodically throughout the year where you can capture the information that helps you substantiate the goal, and then you review it. And how far off you are is basically your like the success or failure of that objective. But it's always important to just be like more ambitious than you think you can achieve. If that makes sense, it's good to have like almost do something that's going to be much harder to actually get done than you think is reasonable. But yeah, that's the same. It's a lot of process, a lot of coordination, and yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was great. And just one quick follow up on it. So one thing that I think about a lot is, as organizations grow, it becomes harder and harder to attribute a single OKR to a single individual or a single team. So what are some ways that a growing organization can ensure that over time they're able to accurately and effectively pinpoint performance or improve lack of performance before it's too late?
Yeah, I think this is something that every company or organization struggles with. At the individual level, one of the interesting things is that you have a lot of people who are contributing part-time, and maybe they're working on projects, and fewer people that are full-time. Where it's a full-time, it's a bit easier to say, kind of like, okay, last month this is my expectation, and here's where you like landed. But for kind of the people who are working part-time, it's much more like it manifests in the contributor payout, because it's much more impact led, right? On a project, so let's say it's like a project where you're doing, launch BNFT2. That project would be tied to an OKR, and in an ideal world, you could then tie a value to that. So you could say that to be really successful in this project, it's worth, you could put a dollar figure to it, or you could put just a high, medium, and low. Like, it's really important to the success of the DAO that we achieve this. So then you can start understanding how an individual contributed to a really high impact project, and then pay out accordingly. So I think this is an evolving space. I don't have the perfect answer, because I don't think anyone has really done this well. In Web 2, it's a different story, because it's called human resources. But yeah, in this space, it's very nascent. I think it's a bit of we just learn along the way, I suppose.
Great, thanks. Super helpful.
Beanology?
Cool.
Hey there. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Hugh, for your insights and your clarity about everything you talked about. That last little thread was actually perfectly a good lead up to what I was going to ask about, which has to do with the idea of people pitching projects for pay, and a couple of the projects that have been pitched, including the BNFT2, and then earlier on the marketing BIP that didn't pass, are structured in a way where it seems like people are asking for money up front for work that hasn't been done yet, and it's sort of odd in this space where people are anonymous and they're not sharing their real names, and therefore it makes it more difficult to share portfolios and interview and just do the traditional human resources interviewing process. But what you just said about kind of flipping it around and making it more target oriented, where if you can hit the metrics, then you get paid, seems to make more sense, right? And even if you don't hit 100% of the metrics, you can at least say after you're done, well, hey, we only got 70%, but would the community be willing to fund 70% of the amount that we talked about? But it's sort of like flipping it on its head so that the community doesn't have to put their trust in somebody that nobody knows literally who they are at all. And a lot of the pitches don't have a lot of detail about exactly what the process is going to be or what the deliverables are going to be, or it's just like, hey, I'm some guy that says I'm good at something, and here's what I'm going to do, and can the community give me $100,000 or beans? So I'm not to say that those people are not good at those things that they're saying they are good at, but it's like, does it make sense in this evolving space to say, hey, go for it, like, here, if you can define what we're going to try and do, we will support you trying to do that, and then if you do it, then you get paid.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought, but like, I think that there are different flavors of it. There's the bug bounty, and then there's what is we need to run a social campaign this month to support the launch of this NFT project. Some of those are going to be coming out of like a treasury potentially, just as a it's permissionless in the sense that you don't need quote a price at the front and then do the work, and then once it's done release the funds. It's much more of a fluid low ticket item. And then on the other side, you have these like bounties or defined project work that's you could actually write up the spec and pitch it to the team. I think in the first version, that's probably where I've had more experience, and it's definitely more of an organic process where ideas emerge from the DAO and then they get prioritized and then put in a backlog, and then they get assigned a value, and that can be that value, high, medium, and low. Can be, generally it's something that's like a discussion that you arrive at that, but provided everyone agrees with it, it's it's like generally understood that that's roughly indicative of how much it's worth from the perspective of paying a contributor out for that thing. But yeah, there's definitely different versions of all of this.
Hugh,
I guess
yeah. Okay. Real quick, I'm just going to hop on back of that question, and then Simon Tees, I'll let you go right after, if that's okay. Hugh, how much would you be willing to share about the compensation structures of other DAOs that you've worked with, as far as, I guess, just really as much or as little detail as you care to go into, but I think that's pretty important for this discussion. So I'm curious how much you could share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to know what part of compensation structure you're interested in, but like at a very high level.
I'll just add,
Oh.
just sorry to cut you off, but I think it was OX Evan who shared that there was like a maximum pay structure for, I think it was for Olympus, that they had kind of like
Yeah.
and I found that kind of interesting, and I just thought you could elaborate on that a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's really topical. So they released they had like a update to their compensation structure recently. The way that they now do it is that they have like a maximum allocation per contributor. So what tends to happen is you get people who contribute across multiple teams, and that's like that change to go actually no. From a department level budget where each department would say how much each person should get from their department budget to a world where it's actually let's set a cap to the amount of money that a person can earn in aggregate. That like basically force function. That's a force function for focus, and it's a really important thing because everyone can jump into chats and contribute in a whole range of discussions, but does that actually lead to value is a different story. So like setting kind of contributor level caps is really important. The other thing, it was on my mind, I may have just lost it, but like that. The other thing to mention is just that the whole process that you go through to say, what is something worth from what is a contribution worth, and like the types of contributions and how does that kind of like the weighting of it, that all the way through to how the allocation decision was made should be like really, really transparent across the whole team so that there's no ambiguity and people don't go, I don't get it. Why did I get this? And so that's like another part of it as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I definitely understand where Beanology is coming from. I think that is an important piece. I think there certainly has to be accountability, and certainly has to be, it's a little tricky too, because there's some people who, were maybe I'm theoretically, we're really trying to encourage full-time people. And, if someone could leave a role and then could come on as a full-time person, it's a little tricky when they can only be paid, retroactively after, they do a certain work. But at the same time, I can also see the argument for that. But I think there could be kind of a balance between like the bug bounty approach and then also something along the lines of like a scaled approach, depending on the quality of the work, that was done. So I don't know. But I do want to bring in Simotes here.
Actually, Dumpling, one thing on that too, actually, because Beanology, that was the NFT proposal we drafted, actually, and for what it's worth, initial one didn't have the payment up front, shifted, that was by week, whatever, we can talk about that offline. But I also think that as Publius is working on the budget, Dumpling, and we kind of parse the DAO up into these separate sections and budgets allocated, it seems like it'll kind of naturally gravitate towards like a 1099 versus like a full-time or part-time space. So I think like, and then obviously, like if you're thinking of like an operations budget or a marketing budget and it's allocated like 500,000 beans or something like that, obviously who's ever kind of spearheading that will have to make sure that the spend, and the allocation of the beans is representative of the actual budget. So I think over time, Beanology will actually see a natural progression away from like abundance of BMPs that you see the way that they are now, because you'll probably have like one central member giving clear direction of like, look, we really need to get this done. Dumpling really needs to get this done for X, Y, or Z. Hence, this is coming out, or we really need this to be done for marketing. Hence, this is coming out. So I would guess that pretty soon, as Publius is saying, the next month is really infrastructure month. But then after that, you'll probably start to see much clearer, less Wild West proposals coming out. I would guess.
Thanks, and I'm sure your project is going to turn out great. I think that what is part of what I'm getting at is like it's the trust factor, because you don't have the standard real world trust mechanisms to verify who people are, or in some cases what their portfolios are or anything like that. But that might kind of lead you to think about like a stepped system where it's like somebody can come in and do a small project and then everybody can see what they delivered and how good it was and say, whoa, look at that. Let's now approve twice as much funding for that. So it's like you don't need the identity or a big portfolio to invest in somebody. You just need to have an increasing track record. Like Publius, there's a good example. We're all willing to kind of approve almost anything that they propose now because they've done such a good job and communicate so well and have a good track record of success. So it's like little versions of that where you have more people that instead of saying, hey, allocate me 300K right off the bat without knowing who I am, why don't I do something for 5,000? And then everybody can decide how that looked. And now you're kind of accruing trust, as you go and establishing yourself in the community. And that's a way to kind of build your involvement as opposed to just kind of coming out of nowhere. So I think it's all these things together are just different ways to think about judging all the proposals that are going to be coming at us.
And I think actually that was kind of an organic thing that happened with the BIP that came in for, I think it was around $250,000. There was a lot of conversation in the community about that was a big spend up front. But I also think that even with the BDPs and the BMPs, as we put them out there, like the integrity of the proposal itself also might be a reflection of the output of the work. So for example, with the NFT proposal that I did put out, like we have 14 deliverables, and frankly, since we've been working on it for over a week now and haven't even talked about the pay or anything like that. So that, I think, pay and like ensuring compensation, that's a whole different conversation. Like I myself have a very strong work ethic, so it's slightly different, but like not different, but like meaning I don't care about the money. But I think the proposal, for example, like in this sense, yeah, I mean, obviously you're trusting the integrity of the people that's putting it out there, but like if we don't hit those 14 things, like I've hired plenty of contractors in the past, and if it's not spelled out exactly what the deliverables are, we just wouldn't bring them on board. So that might be something else too, is, I mean, we could, even as they start to come in, you can scrutinize it. And that actually happened quite a bit, I think, with a handful of them, including the one that was pushed out for the NFTs. So I think like that's something that is kind of great about the DAO that I've seen, is there's been a lot of scrutiny internally as well.
I'd like to also add on a comment where it's kind of like this is a proof of work concept. Like, so you have to show some sort of demonstrable value in that initial proof of work to start the dialogue, to start getting paid. Because yeah, like it doesn't make sense for an anonymous person to just come and be like, claim they can do this and then start getting paid before any work is done. And that kind of like is just a proof of work concept, and also understanding the community more too. Like, you're not just gonna come in, spend a couple of days, even like a week, I would say, unless you're really vibing with people. But you need to spend a meaningful amount of time in the community and start to see like, oh, who's like a community member, who's an active community member, and like start to like get to know other people before, I think, being able to like get hired or do more work and the payment. And that also creates more transparency, or more like validation, when everybody else is on board and you've been talking to them in the community and interacting, like you're going to know like this is probably going to be a good proposal, and I know that X, Y, and Z people think that this is a good idea. And if these people think it's a good idea, other people are probably going to think it's a good idea too. And it just kind of grows. But yeah, I just want to add that comment in there.
Yeah, and to jump in real quick, a lot of the people that we've been looking at hiring, because there isn't much of a Q4 budget left, frankly, they've been working without being paid. And if anything, they may be paid, hopefully will be paid once the Q1 budget comes out, gets approved, and then will be paid retroactively. So part of what you guys are describing is kind of already starting to happen, which is, I think it's kind of a good thing to just show that people like JWW mentioned, and Evan, like you were mentioning, that, you have to show a certain amount of buy-in and a certain amount of involvement in the community before you just instantly, get hired and get paid in advance. So I think those are definitely good concerns, but also just know that usually those people are kind of starting to work without getting paid, which is probably not how we always wanted. It's open for a discussion about how we want to do it in the future, but right now, everyone who's kind of coming on board really has their heart in the right place, and it's really great to see. I want to let J-Man, you're on stage now, and you've been up there for a while, so I want you to have your chance.
Thank you, Dumpling. I guess I also wanted to chime in on sort of the compensation thing. So something that Hugh had mentioned was this idea of like a low, medium, and high payout. But I was thinking instead of just having that kind of be the overall value of like the project and you get paid that at the end, to kind of incentivize full-time work, you could have that in terms of bonuses. So for a given proposal, the person would negotiate sort of the base rate, and that would sort of be the low rate. So just kind of what they would get paid for doing the work in general. And then we would define like a series of OKRs, like he was talking about, where we have like a high tier where this is exceptional, medium tier where, this is what we want, and kind of a low tier where, this is kind of below our expectations. And then based on that, at the end of the project, you would, get a bonus based on, what level of the OKRs you reached. So that way it would kind of allow people to still be, kind of getting paid as they're doing the work. So it would enable full-time work, but then also transition partially to like an outcome-based payment. So we're focused on really rewarding and incentivizing, high-quality work.
Yeah, maybe I can just react to that. It's a really cool idea, actually. I hadn't thought of it like that, but you definitely need to be somewhat more like set up in terms of like the maturity for being able to like say, okay, here's a salary. It requires a lot of trust and maybe a little bit more oversight, but I think that works really well as a strong incentive for people to not only do full-time work but also to like extend themselves beyond what they think they can achieve normally, which is great.
Yeah, I don't think that would necessarily be something that we start doing like right away, but something to kind of aim for in the future when we kind of hit that larger DAO size.
I think it's kind of a cool idea. Yeah.
I'll just bring in
Go ahead, Beanology.
one little final thought on all that, which is, I think I was just trying to protect against a phenomenon that it seems like it could happen, where the bigger the community gets, the more unknown people might be coming around pitching things, and also the more the general community might not know each other or might not have been around long enough to be able to evaluate who has been around and who are higher trust individuals and who to go for thoughts on who to hire. So if you have like more new people in the community and more people pitching to be hired, then there's just a higher risk that if you just leave it up to a majority vote, then you could be hiring people that maybe aren't trustworthy. So I just think that we need to evolve more of a mechanism for review and oversight and discussion of that, and not just have stuff be simple, quick majority votes on a proposal by a lot of people really fast. And I don't know that it's necessarily like that right now, but it seems it could border on that if we're not careful. So I think that's just the main thing that I see as a potential thing to watch out for.
I think it's a very good point, because we could easily, if we right now, like you say, it might be taller, it might be, reasonable, but if we 10x from here or 50x in our community size, all of a sudden we can't be doing a bunch of hires by snapshot proposal. I think it's a very good point for something to look out for as we grow. George?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, similar to figuring out who is the right person to be doing work, there also needs to be a discussion about who is the right person to figure out who is the right person to be doing work. So, in a sense, like, I have a decent technical background, but, if it really came to it, I couldn't necessarily tell you if somebody was an A-class Solidity engineer or not. And so I think with that, both determining who should be doing work and working on the hiring process, as well as who should be determining compensation, you need to start to look towards these like decentralized groups. And so while I do believe strongly in the project-based work, I think also there needs to be sort of, department leads in a sense. And even if those aren't necessarily like one person, but a few people that then determine, who should be, hired in like a more long-term capacity versus a short-term capacity, or not hired at all. I think that's also something important for us to sort of consider.
Certainly. And just to give you guys a little bit of background of kind of how things are going right now, when someone wants to get involved in the DAO, I'm usually their first point of contact. So I will sort of start kind of a quote unquote application with them. And then I'll schedule a call with them where I talk for, we could talk for half an hour. Sometimes, J-Man, I think we were talking for about an hour. And to just get to know them, how they came across Beanstalk, what their skill set is, what their background is. And people have been pretty open with me. And then I jot down a bunch of notes, have a chat with Publius usually, and then if they kind of make it to the next step, I've been connecting them with Publius for a conversation, one that I'm usually on. And then from there, we kind of go and, kind of continue to refine what their role might be, and then eventually post it for a snapshot. So that's kind of the workflow right now. But as we do have, like, as George was mentioning, like department heads and that sort of thing, that would be important, because I'm not really handling as far as like for like Solidity developers. That's really Publius that's, vetting them. And yeah, so that's going to be a process that continues to evolve. But Beanology, so I just wanted to mention some of those proposals that were out there you can look to see who proposed them. And if the person themselves proposed them, or if I proposed it, or if Publius proposed it, they've probably been decently vetted. So that's kind of where the HR process is right now. But as we grow, that is going to be something, having a dedicated HR person, having these department leads, that'll be an important part of that, I think. But open to, what the DAO thinks as well. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. And maybe to let Publius in here real quick, because we're over the hour mark. Happy to keep this going, but yeah, I wanted to see if Publius had anything to comment on this, and then maybe bring a few more people up. And I think this has been pretty fruitful, though.
Well, first off, we've been thrilled to be able to be a little silent. It's really amazing to see everyone who's so interested and with thoughtful questions. And Hugh, I think the DAO is in good hands with you as our steward as we get things set up over the next couple weeks. You seem to have things really strong handle on what's necessary. So I think just not to necessarily close it out, although this has been going quite a while and don't want to overdo it with people's time. So to wrap things up, and then obviously there can be more discussion over the next month, I would say. So mid-January would be our target date to have the infrastructure and the order flow in terms of tickets and work and reporting we think a month is going to be what's probably necessary to get 50 plus people working in an effective fashion and coordinated. Obviously, things are moving lightning quick in the meantime. So we would just encourage everyone to, as long as if you feel like you don't have the stuff that you need to be working on the stuff that you want to work on, especially at this stage of the game, but in general, it will be on you to just make it aware that you need resources or you need help or you need time or you have questions or you don't have access to something that you need. And we will try our hardest to alleviate that friction or that pressure point or whatever it may be. But at the same time, over the next month, this is going to be a little bit just of a learning curve. So while this is all getting set up, we would encourage everyone to remain patient and just step up and contribute in whatever way possible. And it's great to see so many of you here that we're talking to in subgroups and stuff here to witness this discussion. So just as a summary and how we're thinking about the structure a little bit, our hope is that Beanstalk Farms is going to be, well, maybe just a digression even. Q4, the budget was structured as a Beanstalk Farms budget and everything has been funded by Beanstalk Farms. Q1, I think we're thinking about things a little bit differently, having learned some of the lessons of operating under the Q4 framework. So George had a great idea, which was to have Bean Sprout Accelerator funded by the Q1 budget instead and have Bean Sprout fund Beanstalk as part of that initial funding. And so Beanstalk Farms is going to be sort of like the not a company, but more of like the long-term, full-time developers and operations people that are responsible for working on the core project, if you will, and coordinating the core development of Beanstalk with other projects like the Pod Marketplace and the Bean FTs. And then other projects will be funded by Bean Sprout separately. And then the hope is that they will be able to, as appropriate or as needed, leverage the full-time labor, skill set, knowledge, and resources of Beanstalk Farms to facilitate and coordinate their specific project. So something like the Bean FTs can exist in their own project, but through coordinating through the Notion, we'll be able to bring in someone on the UI front to design the web page, and then bring in a front-end Beanstalk Farms developer to implement the UI to handle the Bean FT minting, for example. So in general, the hope is to create a structure that is plug and play so that people can contribute on multiple projects and know what they're doing, and when they have time, they can just plug in and work on some stuff that's meaningful. But it is going to take a couple weeks to get that set up. And in the meantime, we're trying our best here. So enough said on our part. Thrilled that we didn't even need to speak until an hour plus into the meeting. That's a positive indicator to us that this is heading in the right direction. And with that in mind, continue on. This is great. We're happy to answer questions about it or just continue to listen.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. So who else would like to come up?
One thing would be I only have 2 more minutes before I have to leave. So maybe we'll have
Let's
time
get
for
the
one
most
more
of
question.
them. Sure. Sounds like a reasonable end.
Wonderful. So Hugh, we just want to say thank you. We're very excited, and we look forward to seeing how things progress over the coming weeks.
Oh, we have one more.
Thank you.
One more here. JDP 630. Just invited you to the stage.
So, fellas, how you doing?
Hey, go ahead.
Hey, man.
Yeah, so I worked for Olympus for a long time, maybe like 6, 7 months. So I know like a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about regarding DAOs and structuring and the payments and what he was talking about, how it got paid and how we did the changes and everything. So if you guys want help setting the DAO up and any policy ideas, because I was on the policy team for most of the time, I'll be glad to help. I've been in Bean for a while.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Yeah, let's chat.
Yeah, of course. I was thinking maybe possibly somehow putting up a proposal to see if Olympus will help bring some liquidity to Bean. Yeah.
Yes.
That would be amazing.
Together we will all. I'll send you 1,000 pounds of beans.
yeah, but just wanted to say hello, and that's about it. Yeah, love the
Well,
work.
thanks
Nice
so much
to meet you.
for joining us.
Nice to meet you, and don't want to make everyone listen to all of this micro planning, but I think this has been a great structuring meeting, and probably to be continued over the coming weeks as things come into shape. Oh yeah, for sure. It'll definitely be a ever evolving thing. Trust me.
Okay, thanks so much for that, JDP. I just sent you a DM, and Hugh, this has been so helpful. Your guidance, we really appreciate it. Everyone for coming. This is great. I was anticipating like 10 people. We have 36 people interested in the nitty gritty of the how the DAO should be set up. So that's pretty cool.
Amazing. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to put in my skill set to good use here. It's super exciting.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, everyone, and we'll talk soon.